They say a mother's love knows no limits. But what happens when that love is twisted, manipulated, and used as a weapon against her? The summer I turned 70, I gave my daughter the one thing she dreamed of since she was a teenager, a van to launch her flower business. I thought I was giving her freedom, a future, a piece of my heart. What I didn't know was that I'd already lost something far more valuable. My father's land, stolen with the stroke of a pen while I lay fevered in a hospital bed, betrayed by the one person I trusted most. This is the story of what happened next, of a woman they thought was too old, too soft, too slow to notice, or to fight back. But they were wrong, because this isn't just a tale of theft. It's a reckoning, and it starts with a party, a platter of catfish, and a lie whispered through an open window. The July heat in Tallahassee, Florida was relentless, wrapping my small home in a sticky haze as I stood on the weathered veranda in 2018. I was 70, my hands creased from years of folding linens and kneading dough as a cook for a local church. In my palm, I held the keys to a used Ford van, its white paint scuffed but sturdy, a gift I'd just given my daughter, Camille. For 3 years, I'd saved for it, skipping new glasses, forgoing visits to my sister in Georgia, and letting the veranda's loose boards stay unfixed. Camille was 34, and since her teens, she talked of owning a van for her dream flower business, sketching bouquets and delivery routes in her journals. I'd handed her the keys that morning, expecting a spark of joy, maybe a tight hug. Instead, she'd taken them, muttered, "Thanks, Mom," and walked to her husband Darius's car idling at the curb, her steps quick, like she was late for something else. I adjusted my apron, its hem frayed from years of use, and carried a platter of fried catfish to the backyard, where I'd set up for Camille's birthday party. The garden was simple, its grass thin from Florida's sandy soil, but I'd hung paper lanterns and spread mismatched tablecloths across folding tables, my hands busy since sunrise. Guests arrived, neighbors, church friends, and strangers Camille called colleagues, their chatter mingling with the buzz of mosquitoes. Camille's business partner, Lila, glided in, her silk blouse too bright for the humid afternoon, her smile sharp as she nodded at me, like I was a server at her event. I set the catfish beside my lemon meringue pie, a recipe I'd perfected over decades, and stepped back, hoping to fade into the background. But Camille caught my eye, her grin wide and theatrical as she approached. "Mom, you're doing too much," she said, her voice carrying over the crowd's hum. Before I could respond, she grabbed a pitcher of sweet tea from a table and thrust a tray of paper cups into my hands. "Everyone, say hi to the best helper we've got," she called out, her tone playful but edged. Laughter rippled through the guests, some clapping, others nudging each other. Lila winked at Darius, who smirked, leaning against a lawn chair. My heart sank, my smile stiff as I stood there, the tray awkward in my grip, my sensible dress feeling like a uniform. Camille turned away, already laughing with the guest, leaving me in the wake of their amusement. I placed the tray on a table, my fingers trembling, and moved to the garden's edge, my breath uneven but my face composed. The party continued, a steel drum playlist blaring from a speaker, the air thick with the scent of fried food and sunscreen. I collected empty plates, stacking them by the outdoor sink, my movements automatic. The pride I'd felt giving Camille the van had soured, replaced by a gnawing unease I couldn't shake. As I wiped down a table near the house, the kitchen window was open and voices slipped out, Lila's, low and conspiratorial. "The van's perfect, keeps her distracted," she said, her words precise. "We'll get the rest signed soon." Camille's voice followed, cool and certain. "She won't check, trust me." My hand stilled on the tablecloth, my pulse loud in my ears. The van wasn't a gift, it was a diversion, a piece in a plan I hadn't seen coming. I kept working, carrying dishes inside, my expression neutral. In the kitchen, I noticed my catfish barely touched, pushed aside for store-bought chips, a quiet rejection that stung more than it should. I didn't pause, didn't let the hurt show. I drove home in my aging hatchback, the Florida night heavy and moonless. My house was modest, its stucco walls chipped, but it was mine, paid off with years of scraping by. I poured a glass of water I didn't drink and opened the wooden keepsake box in my bedroom. where I stored my most vital papers, my marriage license, Camille's birth certificate, and the will naming her heir to my father's 2-acre plot outside town. My fingers searched, but the will was gone, its absence of betrayal now confirmed. I sat on the bed, the glass sweating in my hand, and knew this was more than a slight. It was a theft, and I was already caught in its web. The night after Camille's party, sleep never came. Lila's words looping in my mind like a cruel refrain. The van's perfect, keeps her distracted. They stung, each repetition unraveling the trust I'd placed in my daughter. I sat in my Tallahassee living room, the clock inching past 3 a.m., the glass of water I'd poured hours ago untouched on the coffee table. My small house, with its chipped stucco and shelves of church cookbooks, felt like a vault locking in my dread. The missing will from my keepsake box gnawed at me. Its absence of theft I couldn't yet prove but felt in every heartbeat. By 5 a.m., I abandoned the couch, shuffled to the kitchen in my worn robe, and opened a notebook I used for grocery lists. I wrote down every detail I'd overheard: Lila's scheme, Camille's assurance, the date, July 15th, 2018, a ledger of betrayal I vowed to decipher. At 7 a.m., I called the Leon County Property Appraiser's office, my voice calm despite the tremor in my hands. The clerk, her tone clipped from early morning fatigue, asked for the address of my father's 2-acre plot, where he'd tended orange trees until his final days. I gave it my words precise, and she typed, then went silent. The property was transferred May 22nd to Sunshine Ventures, LLC, she said. My stomach dropped. Who authorized it? I asked. She read my name, Edna Wilson, notarized by Roy Carter, my cousin. I thanked her, ended the call, and sat at the kitchen table, the notebook open, my breath shallow. Roy, who I hadn't spoken to since a family reunion a decade ago, who'd always chased quick cash, had been roped into this, his stamp sealing my loss. I stared at the keepsake box, its wooden lid still open from my frantic search, and my thoughts drifted to February. I'd been in the hospital, battling pneumonia, my body weak, my mind clouded by fever and antibiotics. Camille had visited, her smile soft but rushed, carrying a folder of papers. Just medical forms, Mom, she'd said, pressing a pen into my hand. Sign these. It's for your treatment. I'd trusted her, my only child, and scratched my name across the pages, my vision hazy, my strength gone. The memory sharpened now, a wound reopened. Those weren't medical forms. They were the will, slipped in when I was too sick to question, my signature stolen under the pretense of care. I dialed Roy, my fingers steady on the phone. He answered after 3 rings, his voice rough, like he'd been up all night. Edna, didn't expect you, he said, too breezy. I didn't waste time. You notarized a transfer of my land, Roy. I was in the hospital, barely conscious, and you let Camille use you. He fumbled, his words a tangle of excuses. Camille said it was your plan, something about estate taxes. I just stamped it. Edna needed the money. I cut him off, my voice sharp. You knew I was sick, and you didn't call me. You betrayed family. He mumbled something about being sorry, but I hung up, my anger a quiet flame, fueling my next steps. By noon, Vera was at my door, her arms full of quilt scraps and a fierce glint in her eyes. We'd sewn blankets for church fundraisers for 20 years, her steady hands balancing my uneven stitches. I told her everything: Camille's helper jab, the conversation through the window, the missing will, Roy's complicity. She sat at my table, sifting through the box's remaining papers, tax receipts, my deed copy, a photo of my father with his orange trees. They forged your will, she asked, her voice low. I nodded, the hospital betrayal raw. They waited until I was too weak to fight. Vera's eyes narrowed. We'll fix this, Edna. They don't know you. She pulled out her tablet, and we searched Florida's business records. Sunshine Ventures was filed in April, its sole officer listed as Lila Grant. The boldness of it struck me. Lila hadn't even tried to hide her name. The van, all $22,000 of it, wasn't a gift. It was a decoy, meant to blind me to their theft of my father's land. Vera saved the filing, her fingers quick, as we built a trail of evidence. I added to my notebook, The clerk's confirmation, Roy's confession, the LLC's date, each piece a step toward justice. Camille texted that afternoon, her tone casual. Dinner Wednesday? I stared at the message, my resolve hardening, and replied, looking forward to it. The words were a mask, a cover for the battle I was planning. I spent the evening alone, the house silent except for the whir of a ceiling fan. I thought of my father, his weathered hands pruning orange trees, his voice promising the land would stay in our family. That 2 acres wasn't just soil, it was his legacy. My anchor, the root I'd clung to through hardship. Camille and Lila thought they could take it, banking on my love, my age, my silence. But they didn't know the woman who'd raised a daughter alone, paid off a house on a cook's wages, and saved for years to give her a dream. I closed my notebook, my determination a steady fire. This was a fight, and I was ready to win. The fire ignited by Camille's betrayal burned steadily over the next 3 days, each hour honing my focus as I prepared to unravel her scheme in my Tallahassee home. I played my role flawlessly, replying to her texts with warmth, as if the theft of my father's land hadn't cracked my heart. My modest house, with its chipped stucco and faded curtains, became a war room. I sat at the kitchen table, surrounded by stacks of papers, hospital bills, old tax forms, my notebook now a chronicle of Camille and Lila's deceit. I searched through emails from Lila, hoping for a trace of the forged will, but found only sterile invoices labeled medical expenses, their blandness a likely mask for the stolen document. Each dead end fueled my determination to build an airtight case. Vera connected me with Gloria, a real estate lawyer from her quilting circle, and I called her the first morning. I recounted the hospital visit, Camille's stack of papers, and my fever-weakened signature, my voice even despite the memory's bite. A signature under duress or illness is fraud, Gloria said, her tone sharp but reassuring. If you've got evidence of intent, Edna, we can reverse this. Her words anchored me, turning my hurt into a plan. I spent hours gathering proof. The Sunshine Ventures registration listing Lila as owner, screenshots of Lila's social media posts crowing about new ventures with a sly grin, and a timeline tying my pneumonia to the transfer, pieced together from county filings and hospital records. Each item was a knot in the trap I was weaving, deliberate and strong. Vera came over the second evening, her eyes fierce as she handed me a USB drive. She'd found a voicemail Camille had sent Lila, accidentally saved on Vera's phone from a group chat mix-up. She played it and Camille's voice filled my kitchen, cool and conspiratorial. Once she signs the rest, the land's ours. Lila, you'll make it look clean. Lila's chuckle followed, sharp and smug. I gripped the table, the weight of their voices cementing every fear. This was no mistake. It was a calculated theft, my trust their leverage. Vera backed up the file, her hands steady. This is it, Edna. They can't dodge this. The voicemail was my trump card, a truth they couldn't twist. The evidence sharpened my anger into precision, a tool for justice rather than rage. I ordered 3 hidden cameras online, their lenses tiny but powerful, equipped with audio and night vision. Vera helped me set them up in the dining room, her fingers careful as she tucked one into a ceramic vase, another inside the light fixture's base, and the third behind a wall mirror. We checked the feeds on her tablet, the angles covering the dining table completely. No blind spots. The cameras were my silent witnesses, poised to capture the confrontation I was orchestrating. I scheduled the dinner for Wednesday, texting Camille, Darius, and Lila. Family night like we used to have. Camille replied with a quick love that and a heart emoji. Lila and Darius agreed tersely, their responses locking them into my plan. I rearranged the dining room, moving the table so Camille, Darius, and Lila would face me, their backs to the wall, no easy way out. I added chairs for Vera, my steadfast ally, and one left empty, a subtle pressure to keep them on edge. The evidence, printouts, screenshots, the voicemail transcript, went into my old prayer book, its cracked leather cover a fitting vault on the dining room shelf. I spent evenings practicing my speech in front of the bedroom mirror, my reflection resolute as I rehearsed. You stole my land. You used my sickness. You're finished. I imagined Camille's forced smile, Lila's defiant glare, Darius's uneasy fidgeting, and felt my resolve harden. This was about reclaiming my father's legacy, not just revenge. The night before the dinner, I sat in my rocking chair, the house dark except for a single lamp. I held a photo of my father, his hands stained from picking oranges, his smile wide as he'd handed me the deed years ago. Those 2 acres were more than land. They were his sacrifice, my inheritance, the root Camille and Lila thought they could uproot. They'd counted on my age, my love for my daughter, my silence, but they'd underestimated me. I tucked the photo into my notebook beside the growing list of their lies and closed it. Wednesday's dinner would be my reckoning, my chance to turn their betrayal into their undoing, and I was ready to strike. The Wednesday of the dinner dawned, and I spent the morning scrubbing my Tallahassee home until every corner gleamed. Not for their comfort, but to ensure my truth would land in a space free of clutter. I was setting a stage, not a homecoming. I spread my mother's lace tablecloth over the dining table, its delicate threads a quiet defiance, and set 6 places, one for me at the head, one each for Camille, Darius, and Lila across from me, one for Vera at my side, and an empty chair to keep them uneasy. The hidden cameras in the vase, light fixture, and mirror hummed quietly, their feeds active. A discreet audio recorder, tucked inside a vase of magnolias at the table's center, captured every word. I cooked a meal that could have been love, sautéed shrimp, cornbread muffins, roasted sweet potatoes, played it as if family still meant something, though I knew my words would turn it all to ash. Camille arrived first, just past 5, her bright sundress clashing with her strained smile, like she sensed the room was too still. She hugged me lightly, her "Hey Mom" too casual, and glanced around, her eyes skimming the table. Lila swept in next, a bottle of white wine in hand, her laughter loud and hollow, her silk scarf fluttering like a warning flag. Darius trailed behind, his cologne sharp, his gaze fixed on the floor, avoiding mine. I greeted them with a warm nod, took their bags, poured iced tea, and kept the conversation light. Florida's storms, a new cafe downtown, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. Vera arrived, her presence a calm anchor, her quick glance confirming our plan was set. We sat, the table a silent battlefield beneath the veneer of hospitality. I raised a glass to family, the word bitter on my tongue, and we clinked, their smiles thin, like they felt the weight of the empty chair beside them. The first 20 minutes were stiff, filled with forced praise for the shrimp and vague talk about traffic. Lila shifted to new projects, her voice smooth, like she was pitching to a client. Camille nodded, her eyes on Lila, while Darius ate mechanically, his fork scraping the plate. I sipped my tea, letting the wine soften their edges, watching their guards slip with each glass. The magnolias in the vase stood tall, their scent mingling with the tension. Halfway through the meal, when the plates were still half full, I set my napkin down and smiled, my pulse steady, my resolve like steel. Before we get to the key lime pie, I said, my tone measured but firm, there's something we need to address. Camille's laugh was nervous, a flicker of unease crossing her face. Lila tilted her head, her lips tight. Darius froze, his fork midair. I stood, walked to the shelf, and pulled my old prayer book from its place, its leather warm in my hands. From its pages, I retrieved 3 manila envelopes, each labeled with their names in my neat handwriting. I handed one to Camille, one to Lila, one to Darius, my movements deliberate. Open them, I said, returning to my seat, my hands clasped. They hesitated, exchanging glances, then tore into the envelopes. Their faces changed as they pulled out the contents. The Sunshine Ventures registration, screenshots of Lila's New Ventures posts, a transcript of Camille's voicemail, hospital bills for my pneumonia, and notarization records bearing Roy's name. Camille's fingers tightened on the papers, her breath shallow. Lila's eyes narrowed, her jaw set. Darius's hands shook, his envelope slipping to the table. I looked at Camille, my voice low but unyielding. You stole my father's land. You used my illness, my trust, to forge my signature. You planned it, and it's all here. Every lie, every step. Lila reacted first, her voice sharp. This doesn't prove anything, Edna. Just papers. I held Camille's gaze, ignoring Lila. You got Roy to notarize it, Lila to hide it, and thought a van would keep me quiet. You bet on me being too old, too loving to notice. But I did, and these cameras caught you tonight. I reached into my pocket, pulled out a flash drive in a clear case, and placed it beside the magnolias. This has everything: your words, your reactions, your guilt. Stop me, and the world sees who you really are. The room fell silent, the air heavy with their defeat. Camille clutched her envelope, her eyes wide, her mouth opening but no words forming. Lila's hands gripped her papers, her knuckles pale, her bravado gone. Darius stared at the flash drive, his head bowed, his silence an admission. The food sat cold, the wine untouched. I stood, my chair scraping softly against the floor. This is the last time you sit at my table as family, I said, my voice final. You're done. I walked out of the dining room, leaving them with their envelopes, their lies exposed, the camera still recording. The quiet that followed was mine, a triumph carved from their betrayal. The silence that trailed my exit from the dining room lingered in my Tallahassee home like a held breath, as if the walls themselves braced for what I'd unleashed. I didn't return to clear the plates or serve the key lime pie waiting in the fridge. Instead, I retreated to my bedroom, shut the door, and opened Vera's tablet, her anonymous account already signed in. My fingers were steady as I uploaded the video we'd edited the night before, a stark montage that sliced through pretense. Camille's helper quip at her party, Lila's voicemail plotting to make it clean, their stunned silence at the dinner table, and my voice, resolute. You are no longer my daughter. I added no captions, no embellishments, just the unfiltered truth. I hit publish, the upload bar creeping across the screen, and closed the tablet. The night was quiet, the hum of a distant lawnmower the only sound. But I felt a shift, like a chain I'd carried for years finally snapping. By morning, the video had thousands of views, the number climbing as I sipped tea and checked Vera's phone, linked to the account. Notifications flooded in, shares, likes, comments, a tide I hadn't anticipated. By evening, it surpassed 50,000, spreading across social media like a Florida storm rolling in fast. Vera called, her voice a mix of awe and urgency. Edna, it's on Channel 12. They're calling it a scandal. I turned on the TV, and there it was, a headline flashing. Tallahassee mother exposes daughter's land theft in viral video. The anchor detailed the fraud, the dinner, my evidence, her tone measured, but gripping. I muted the broadcast, my tea cooling in my hands, and watched the views hit 80,000. The world had listened, and Camille's carefully crafted image was unraveling. The fallout was swift. Camille and Lila's flower business, a boutique shop they'd built on charm and Instagram, drowned in a wave of negative reviews, customers calling them thieves and liars. Their website crashed under the traffic, its booking form disabled. Lila's business license was suspended. A state investigation launched after someone forwarded the video with the Sunshine Ventures filings. Darius vanished from town, his social media accounts deleted, his phone number disconnected, as if he'd erased his existence. I didn't track their collapse, didn't search for their names, or ask church friends for gossip. Their ruin was their own, a consequence of the deceit they'd sown. My focus was on the legal fight to reclaim my father's land, guided by Gloria, my lawyer, whose calm expertise kept me steady. A letter arrived from Gloria 4 days later, its pages crisp and authoritative. Camille's inheritance rights were voided. A fraud complaint was filed with the county, and the forge will was overturned, my father's 2 acres restored to my name. The updated deed was on its way, a document I'd hold like a shield. I sat at my kitchen table, the letter open, the new deed beside it, and felt no surge of triumph, only a quiet strength, like a tree standing firm after a hurricane. The land wasn't just acres. It was my father's labor, my family's legacy, and I'd fought to keep it mine. Camille texted that afternoon, her message brief, "Call me, Mom." I messed up. I read it, my thumb pausing over the screen, then deleted it without responding. Her remorse, if real, came too late, a shadow cast by her choices. My mailbox filled with letters from strangers, their words a blend of support and shared pain. Some called me a hero, others recounted their own betrayals. One woman wrote of her son selling her farmland while she lay in a coma, her letter raw with grief, but resolute. "Your story gave me courage," she said. I read her words, my chest tight, and realized my fight had become a signal for others bearing similar scars. Vera visited that evening, her grin wide as she taped the best online comments to my fridge like trophies. Icon one read, "Her strength is everything," said another. We chuckled, the sound easing the weight in my heart, but beneath it, I felt a deeper truth. The victory wasn't in the views or the news. It was in the land, now mine again, and the silence I'd shattered. I walked to my bedroom, opened my keepsake box, and pulled out the photo of my father, his hands rough from tending orange trees, his eyes bright with pride when he deeded the land to me. I traced his face, whispering, "It's ours again." The legal battle was won, the deed secure, but the peace I felt was my own, a quiet power forged in the fire of betrayal. 5 months after the video rocked Tallahassee, I moved onto my father's 2 acres, into a modest house I'd built with the last of my savings. Vera helped me settle in, her laughter filling the air as we painted the walls of mint green, Etta James's soulful voice drifting from an old record player, the scent of fresh paint mingling with the Florida breeze. The house was small, its roof low but sturdy, its windows catching the morning sun. It was mine, reclaimed from Camille's betrayal, a piece of the land my father had tended until his final days. We hung curtains Vera had stitched, their soft cotton swaying gently, and unpacked my cookbooks, a chipped teacup, and a quilt my grandmother had made, each item anchoring me to this new start. I transformed the old barn out back into a sanctuary for women like me, wounded, betrayed by those they'd nurtured. I named it Sprout, a word that carried the promise of growth from broken soil. I didn't advertise, just whispered the news through church friends, and soon 3 women arrived. Sarah, whose son had sold her jewelry for drug money. Marge, left homeless by a daughter scam. And Tess, whose children had drained her savings, moved in, their suitcases light, but their spirits resilient. They worked the small garden we started, planting pumpkins and green beans, their hands steady in the earth, their quiet chatter breathing life into the barn. Sprout wasn't just a refuge, it was a place to rise again, and I felt its purpose in my core. One morning, a delivery driver left an envelope at the gate, no return address. Inside were the keys to the Ford van I'd given Camille, their metal scratched and a note in her handwriting, left it at the road. Saudi. I didn't check if the van was there, didn't care if it sat abandoned. Instead, I walked to the barn, found a piece of weathered wood, and carved words into it with a pocket knife. She was more than old. I hung it on the porch, the keys nailed beside it, a silent testament to what I'd overcome. Sarah noticed it first, her gaze lingering, but she didn't ask and I didn't explain. The sign spoke for itself. Every dawn, I watered the orange trees my father had planted, my fingers brushing their leaves, whispering to the land that it was safe. The ritual grounded me, a vow that no one would steal this place again. Letters kept arriving, slipped into my mailbox or sent through Vera's anonymous account. Strangers thanked me for the video, for giving voice to their struggles. One woman wrote of her daughter forging her mortgage, leaving her bankrupt, her words heavy with pain but laced with resolve. "You showed me I can stand," she said. I replied, my pen firm, grow from the ashes. "You're stronger than you think." Their stories wove into mine, a network of survival, and I stored their letters in a tin beside my father's photo, their weight a quiet strength. Camille appeared one afternoon, her knock soft against the new door. I saw her through the window, her face gaunt, her jacket too thin for the cooling September air. I paused, my hand on the knob, torn between shutting her out and needing to see if any trace of my daughter remained. I opened the door, stepping back, and she entered, her eyes scanning the mint walls like a stranger. "Hi, Mom," she said, her voice brittle. I offered water, not warmth, and we sat at the kitchen table, the silence thick. I didn't mean to lose you, she said, tears streaming, her hands twisting in her lap. Lila pushed, and I thought the land would save the business. I was wrong. I listened, my expression still, as she spilled apologies, each one a plea for absolution. When she finished, I looked at her, my voice calm but unwavering. You didn't lose me, Camille. You chose to steal, to lie, to break me. You thought I was too old to fight, but you were mistaken. Her eyes searched mine, desperate for a softening, but I had none to give. I don't hate you, I said, but you're not my daughter anymore. You're a stranger, and I owe you nothing. She nodded, her shoulders sagging, and I stood, opening the door. As she passed, I didn't reach for her, didn't waver. I closed it, leaned against the wood, and felt a peace settle, deep and unshaken. I returned to the kitchen, the water glass untouched, and looked out at the garden, where Tess was picking beans, her hum carrying on the breeze. The land was mine, its deed clean, its soil a witness to my fight. I stepped outside, the Florida dusk warm, and touched the orange trees, their leaves soft against my fingers. My name, Edna Wilson, was back on the land, back on my life, and I was whole, not because the world had seen my story, but because I'd chosen to tell it.